Imagine a house where you open a bedroom door, only to find a solid brick wall behind it. You climb a staircase, but it leads nowhere, hitting the ceiling. Do you think this is a drunken foreman's mistake? No, it's the only way to survive if you're being hunted by ghosts. Some people built mansions for love, others to hide from the sunlight, and the owner of the 10th house on our list actually murdered people in his basement to perform a dark ritual. Today, we'll venture inside 13 buildings whose architects have completely lost touch with reality. And believe me, by the time we reach the 13th place, you'll want to double check the locks on your front doors. Imagine you're walking through a typical Vietnamese city. There's noise, mopeds, the smell of food all around, and suddenly, something appears before you that belongs more in a Salvador Dali nightmare than in the real world. It's a giant concrete tree, as if it melted in the sun. It twists, stretches strange tentacles towards the sky, and stares at tourists with the empty eye sockets of crooked windows. Locals simply call this place the Crazy House. And believe me, the name perfectly describes what goes on inside. As soon as you cross the threshold, your brain starts to malfunction. The human eye is accustomed to order, right angles, straight walls, clear geometry. Here, there's none of that. In the entire gigantic complex, you won't find a single straight line. Walls merge into floors, staircases spiral madly, and can suddenly end in nowhere. And bridges between buildings hang in the air like shaky lianas in the jungle. You're not walking through a house. You're literally climbing inside the organism of some mythical monster. But the most astonishing thing is its origin story. Who could build something like this and not end up in a mental asylum or prison for violating all building codes? Meet Madame Dang Viet Nha. And she's not just an eccentric artist. She's the daughter of Vietnam's former General Secretary, Ho Chi Minh's right-hand man. Imagine Brezhnev's daughter at the height of stagnation, building a psychedelic castle with a giant spiderweb in the center of the capital. It sounds like nonsense, but in Vietnam, it's a reality. Madame Nga didn't even have blueprints. Seriously, not a single engineering plan. She would draw surreal paintings and give them to workers with the words, "Build this." Imagine the faces of ordinary builders who, instead of a foundation plan, were given a watercolor drawing of a giant giraffe with a tea room in its belly. For years, the authorities dreamed of demolishing this anti-socialist horror, but the magic of the Red Princess, surname, saved the building. No one dared to refuse her. And it's not a museum, it's a functioning hotel. You can actually rent a room here if you have strong nerves. Each room is dedicated to an animal, and the design is, to put it mildly, an acquired taste. For example, in the tiger room, a huge statue of the predator with glowing red eyes stares at your bed all night, unblinking. And mirrors are hung in such a way that you constantly get scared by your own reflection. The hostess, who is already over 80, says that this house is a reflection of her subconscious. And looking at these eerie labyrinths, it makes you feel uneasy to think about what goes on in this grandmother's head. But at least this place is safe. Unlike the next house, which was built not for living, but to escape the end of the world. Imagine driving down a dusty road in Colorado. Around you, a desert, silence, and suddenly something dazzlingly bright flashes on the horizon, like a gigantic silver palace. You drive closer expecting to see high-tech architecture or a modern art museum, but instead your jaw drops because this palace is entirely made of trash. This is Kano's castle, and its building material is not brick or concrete. It's millions of empty beer cans, old car hubcaps, rusty grill grates, and miles of wire. All of it glitters in the sun so brightly that it hurts your eyes. 4 enormous towers rise above the desert, and it looks as if a junkyard suddenly gained consciousness and decided to build itself a fortress. The creator of this place is Donald Espinosa, whom everyone calls simply Kano, And his story is not just a whim, it's a real tragedy. Cano is a Vietnam War veteran. He returned home with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and a peaceful life never came for him. In the early 80s, he began this endless construction. Why? Not for fame and not for tourists. Cano is absolutely convinced that Armageddon is coming. In his inflamed mind, a crazy theory was born. Only aluminum can save humanity from the coming end of the world. He believes that these shining walls will become a shield that will reflect God's wrath, a nuclear explosion, or an invasion of demons. Cano claims that Jesus Christ himself gave him permission to build, signing a contract right in his head. Neighbors try to avoid this place. Cano lives there without electricity or heating, amidst mountains of metal, and often thanks Vitamin Mary for inspiration. No one knows to this day who this is, whether he's referring to the Virgin Mary or if it's a slang term for the amount of alcohol it took to free up millions of beer cans for construction. This place evokes mixed feelings. On one hand, the scale is astonishing. One man with his bare hands twisting wire day after day for 30 years. On the other, it becomes eerie because what stands before you is not just a house. It is the material embodiment of severe psychological trauma. It's a fortress where a lonely soldier tries to hide from his inner demons, awaiting an apocalypse that, for him, seems to have already arrived. Let's travel to France at the end of the 19th century. Meet Ferdinand Cheval. He's not an architect, not a rich man, and not an artist. He's an ordinary rural postman. Every day he walks 30 kilometers, delivering letters and newspapers. A boring, difficult life. But one day, in April 1879, he trips over a strangely shaped stone. Any normal person would kick the cobblestone, curse, and move on. Cheval, however, picked it up, examined it, and put it in his pocket. At that moment, something clicked in his head. From that day on, perhaps the most beautiful madness in history began. Cheval decided to build an ideal palace, alone, with his own hands. The next 33 years of his life turned into an endless marathon. By day, he delivered mail, incidentally filling his pockets and wheelbarrow with stones he found on the road. And at night, when the whole village was asleep, he lit a kerosene lamp and began to build. Imagine night silence, and only the sound of a lonely old man's pickaxe. Neighbors considered him the village madman. They laughed at him, pointed fingers at their heads, and his wife begged him to stop disgracing the family. But Cheval didn't hear them. He built what he saw on the postcards he delivered. Hindu temples, Swiss chalets, medieval castles. He mixed it all into one insane stone symphony. The result is shocking. This building is unlike anything else in the world. Stone palms, giant figures, gargoyles, waterfalls, caves. Every inch is covered in carvings. And it all holds together by sheer willpower, cement, and the fanatical persistence of one man. Doctors said he was obsessed with a delusion, but he just kept laying stone after stone. But the end of the story is even cooler. When Cheval turned 78, he finished the palace and asked the authorities for only one thing: permission to be buried inside like a pharaoh in a pyramid. The officials wrinkled their noses and said, "Absolutely not. French law prohibits burial outside cemeteries." Do you think the old man gave up? Not a chance. At 78, when others can barely walk, he took his wheelbarrow and went to the local cemetery, spending another 8 years of his life to build himself a mausoleum in the same style. He finished it at 86, put down his trowel, and a couple of days later quietly died, knowing he had beaten the system. Welcome to Sicily in the 15th century in the town of Bagheria. Here stands a mansion that could have been a set for a Tim Burton film, but was built 200 years before his birth. This is Villa Palagonia, more popularly known as the Villa of Monsters. Usually wealthy people adorn their homes with statues of Greek gods or beautiful nymphs. Prince Francesco Gravini took a different path. He surrounded his house with an army of grotesques. Along the perimeter of the wall stood over 600 statues, and among them, there wasn't a single normal face. Dwarves with gigantic heads, hunchbacks, women with horse bodies, monsters with multiple noses. It was a real parade of mutants carved in stone. Locals crossed themselves as they passed by, believing that if a pregnant woman looked at these statues, she would give birth to a demon child. But the real attraction awaited guests inside. Prince Gravina was, perhaps, the first and most cruel prankster in history. He specially designed the interior to cause people physical and moral pain. Imagine you're a distinguished guest arriving at a ball, wanting to sit on a luxurious velvet chair. Be careful. The chair legs are of different lengths, so you either slide off or sit crookedly. But that's only half the problem. Legends say that small metal spikes were hidden under the upholstery of the sofas. They didn't kill, but they pricked, shall we say, in the most delicate places, causing guests to jump up with a grimace of pain. And the prince would watch this, probably chuckling into his powdered wig. And the apotheosis of this madness was the Hall of Mirrors. The ceiling and walls were covered with hundreds of mirrors, but not ordinary ones. They were made of small shards and installed at different angles. When beautiful, dressed-up ladies and gentlemen entered there, they saw not their magnificence, but thousands of distorted, ugly reflections. The prince turned the elite of society into the same monsters that stood in his garden. Why did he do this? They say Francesco Gravina himself was an extremely unattractive man, perhaps a hunchback, and he decided to take revenge on the whole world, making everyone feel ugly and unhappy. Even the great poet Goethe, who visited the villa, was horrified. He wrote that this place was madness frozen in stone, and admitted that he wanted to burn the house to cleanse his eyes. Today, little remains of the former torture interior, but the statues still stand, reminding us that the rich cry too, and make others cry. Now let's move from sunny Italy to the harsh realities of the Russian north. Arkhangelsk, a city where wooden architecture is the norm. But what Nikolai Sutyagin built here doesn't fit into any norms. It was a true wooden Frankenstein that scared the whole city and made it into record books as the tallest wooden house on the planet. Imagine a typical private sector. Vegetable gardens, fences, two-story houses. And in the middle of this landscape, piercing the sky, stands a monstrous tower as tall as a 13-story building. 38 meters of pure wood, without concrete, without steel, and, as legends claim, practically without a single nail. Locals called it the wooden mushroom, but it looked more like the castle of an evil sorcerer from a very low-budget fantasy. The author of this madness was Nikolai Sutyagin, a local businessman with, let's say, a very turbulent biography, including prison sentences. In the early 90s, he was released from prison and decided to build himself a house. Just a big house. But as the saying goes, appetite comes with eating. When the builders finished 2 floors, Nikolai thought the roof looked somewhat meager. He ordered another floor to be built, then looked still too low, and it spiraled. Sutyagin simply couldn't stop. It became a true obsession. He added floor after floor, turret after turret, turning the house into an endless labyrinth. He dreamed that from the top floor he would see the White Sea. He had no architectural education, no blueprints, no permission from the authorities, only ambition and a lot of wood. Neighbors lived in constant fear. Imagine what it's like to live in the shadow of a giant splinter that creaks in the wind and sways during a storm. Everyone understood that if this monstrosity caught fire, the entire neighborhood would go up in flames. If it collapsed, it would bury half the street. It was a ticking time bomb. But the most chilling thing about this story is how it ended. Sutyagin was imprisoned again. While the owner was serving his sentence, his unfinished skyscraper began to rot and crumble. It became a haven for the homeless and local hooligans. Eventually, the authorities' patience ran out. The court ordered its demolition. It was a whole special operation. The house was dismantled by hand, layer by layer, because it was impossible to bring in heavy machinery. Sut Yagin, returning from prison, lived in the remnants of his grandeur, in a small annex at the base of the tower, and watched his dream turn into firewood. In the end, the remains of the house simply burned down. Today, there's an empty lot in its place, but photographs of the wooden skyscraper still circulate online, shocking foreigners. They can't believe that such a thing is even possible to build. Apparently it is if you have a lot of wood, no brakes, and a complete lack of self-preservation instinct. Let's move to London, to the prestigious Hackney district. Here, houses cost millions of pounds, expensive cars drive on the streets, and lawns are meticulously trimmed. But amidst this idyll stood a mansion that drove the entire neighborhood mad for decades. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary, slightly dilapidated Victorian house, but what lay beneath it would have made any engineer's hair stand on end. The owner of this house, William Little, was nicknamed the Mole Man by his neighbors. And this isn't just an offensive nickname, it's a statement of fact. For 40 years, this Irish engineer did only one thing. He dug, without excavators, without machinery. Just a shovel, a pickaxe, and endless perseverance. Why? When asked, he shrugged and replied, "I just wanted to expand the wine cellar a bit, and then I got carried away." And got carried away is an understatement. Little dug a complex network of tunnels under his house, up to 8 meters deep and 20 meters long in all directions. Imagine the horror of the neighbors. You're living your life, and meanwhile, under your kitchen floor, a strange old man with a flashlight is digging catacombs. People heard scraping and knocking at night. And then the dreadful began. The sidewalk in front of the house suddenly collapsed, creating a hole into the abyss. Cracks appeared in the street. It seemed as if the entire block was about to sink into the ground. When the authorities finally obtained a warrant and broke into the house, they were stunned. Inside the mansion, there was practically no floor. It was a shell, inside which mountains of excavated earth, old cars, yes, he dragged cars in there, and trash were piled up. William himself slept on a precarious platform, suspended over a black abyss, like a pirate over the sea. Engineers discovered that the house had turned into Swiss cheese. Tunnels spread in all directions, undermining neighboring plots and city communications. In one place, he accidentally exposed a 450-volt live cable. One wrong swing of the pickaxe, and half the neighborhood would have been without power, and the mole himself would have turned into a grill. The funniest and saddest part is that Little genuinely didn't understand what the problem was. When he was evicted, he protested that he was being prevented from pursuing his hobby. To fill the holes he had dug with concrete, the city had to bring in several concrete mixers and presented him with a bill for £300,000. William Little died a few years after his eviction, leaving behind the legend of a man who so desperately wanted to delve into himself that he almost dragged all of London down with him. We emerge from the London tunnels and ascend high into the Colorado mountains. If you think building a castle alone is impossible, prepare for a mind warp. Before you stands Bishop Castle. It's a colossal fortress of stone and iron, as tall as a 16-story building, with towers, spiral staircases, stained glass windows, and even a giant dragon head that breathes real fire. And do you know how many people built it? 1. Jim Bishop. He bought this plot of land when he was only 15 years old for a pittance. At first he wanted to build a cabin, but then he started laying stones and simply couldn't stop. He's been building this castle for over 60 years. Every stone, every bag of cement, every iron beam he lifted with his own hands. Without cranes, without a team of helpers, without special equipment. Just Jim, his muscles, and a simple system of blocks and ropes. But the craziest thing here is the complete lack of safety measures. Jim hates rules, inspectors, and the government. He has no blueprints. He says, "If I want to build a tower here, I just take and build it." Visiting this castle is not for the faint of heart. When you climb to the very top, you walk on open-work metal bridges that hang over a chasm. There are no railings in places, or they are too low. The structure creaks and noticeably sways in the wind. There are no caution signs, no safety harness. If you fall, that's your problem. Jim himself is, to put it mildly, an eccentric character. He often works right during tours. Tourists can see a stern old man carrying stones and simultaneously shouting sermons about how the government is trying to control our brains. Sometimes he's a sweet grandpa, and sometimes he starts yelling at visitors to get off his private property. It's a real Russian roulette. You never know what mood the king of the mountain will be in today. The castle's special pride is the ballroom with high vaulted ceilings and that very metal dragon on the roof, welded from scraps of ventilation pipes. On holidays, Jim pumps gas into it and sets it alight, turning the castle into a fire-breathing monster. This place creates a dissonance. On one hand, you see an incredible feat of human will. One person proved that the impossible is possible. On the other, you realize you're standing on top of a shaky pile of stones built by a mad anarchist without the slightest notion of engineering. And every step here could be your last. Welcome to Florida, to a place that has been baffling engineers and physicists for 100 years. Coral Castle. At first glance, nothing special. Strange stone blocks, walls, towers, but when you learn the numbers, it becomes unsettling. These blocks weigh up to 30 tons. That's more than the stones at Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now look at the builder, Edward Leedskalnin, a small, frail Latvian immigrant, 1.5 meters tall and weighing only 45 kilograms. He looked as if he could be blown away by the wind. How did this gnome single-handedly move multi-ton megaliths without cranes, without hydraulics, without assistance? This is the greatest mystery of the 20th century. Ed worked only at night. As soon as the sun set, he lit a lantern, and neighbors heard strange singing and a faint scratching sound. No one ever saw the building process. Local boys who tried to peek swore they saw giant stones floating in the air like balloons. When asked how he did it, Ed just smiled slyly and replied, "I have discovered the secret of the pyramid builders. I have learned how to control gravity." And looking at his creation, it's hard to call him a liar. The most shocking example is a stone door weighing 9 tons. It was fitted with such perfect jeweler-like precision that it could be opened with a single finger. It rotated so smoothly that even a child could push it. When years later the mechanism broke, it took a huge crane and a team of engineers just to remove this door. They discovered that Ed had drilled through the 9-ton stone perfectly straight and inserted an old truck bearing. How he did this with a hand drill in 1930, science still doesn't know. Why did he build it at all? For love, of course. Back home in Latvia, his fiancée, 16-year-old Agnes, left him literally the day before their wedding. She said he was too old and too poor for her. Edward was heartbroken. He moved to the USA and dedicated his entire life to building this castle for his sweet Agnes, hoping that one day she would come and realize what she had lost. Spoiler: she never came. Edward died alone in a hospital, taking the secret of anti-gravity, or whatever it was he possessed, to his grave. A note was found on his table. Gone to the hospital. Coral Castle remains a monument to a great love and an even greater mystery. We leave sunny Florida and head to the harsh, windy desolation of Wyoming. Here on Lonely Hill stands a building that locals call the Madman's House. And looking at it, I understand that there are simply no other names. Imagine a gloomy silhouette against the mountains. It's not a castle or a palace. It's a chaotic pile of wood balconies, stairs, and terraces that climb over each other into the sky. As if someone decided to play a giant game of Jenga but forgot the rules and just piled up blocks until they hit the clouds. This is the Smith Mansion. Its creator, Francis Lee Smith, was a talented engineer. In the 70s, he decided to build a house for his family. At first, everything went according to plan, but then something clicked in his head. The construction turned into an obsession. Smith stopped communicating with friends, abandoned his job, and spent 24 hours a day on this hill. He had no blueprints. He just improvised. There will be a balcony here, he decided, and nailed boards over the abyss, and a spiral staircase here. The house grew like a cancerous tumor, overgrown with new additions that had no functional meaning. The family eventually couldn't stand living on a construction site and left, leaving him alone with his wooden monster. But the most terrifying thing about this house is its height and the wind. Wyoming is famous for its hurricane-force winds, and Smith built the upper floors without safety gear, often working at night under the light of a spotlight. It was a game with death that lasted for years. The house creaked, groaned under the gusts of wind, but Smith kept climbing higher and higher, and one day the house claimed its due. In 1992, while working on one of the upper, unprotected terraces, Francis Lee Smith slipped or was blown away by the wind. No one knows for sure. He fell from the height of his own creation and died. His body was found only 2 days later. The house, which he built as the meaning of his life, became his killer. Today, the mansion stands abandoned. The wind whistles through empty rooms, loose boards creak, and rare tourists who dare to approach say they feel a heavy, oppressive gaze here. It is a monument to pure, uncontrolled obsession that consumed a man entirely. We travel to Mexico, to the city of Guanajuato. Here stands a beautiful historic mansion that locals avoid by a kilometer. Its official name is the House of Lamentations. And believe me, it earned that name for a reason. The owner of this house was Marquis Tadeo Mejia. In the 1890s, he was a wealthy, respected man. But one day, robbers broke into his house and killed his beloved wife, Constanza. At that moment, the Marquis's mind shattered. He didn't just grieve. He refused to believe that death was the end. Obsessed with the idea of bringing back his beloved, Tadeo turned not to priests, but to dark magic. He found a local witch who whispered to him an insane recipe for resurrection. But the ingredients for this ritual were horrific. He needed human blood and sacrifice. The mansion turned into a trap. The Marquis invited people to his home, supposedly for work or charity, and they disappeared forever. Neighbors began to hear strange sounds from the basement at night, inhuman screams and wails that made their blood run cold. But the police long ignored the rumors, because the Marquis was too influential a figure. Tadeo's madness progressed. He believed that the souls of the victims would help him connect with his wife in the afterlife. When years later the authorities finally entered the house, after the Marquis himself had died, ironically by suicide, they uncovered the basement. What they saw there made seasoned policemen run out into the street. Human remains, bones, skulls, were found in the walls and under the floor. It was not a scientist's laboratory, but a slaughterhouse. Legend has it that the groans and pleas of these unfortunates gave the house its name. They say that even after 100 years, if you approach the walls at night, you can hear a quiet, mournful cry. Today, the building houses a museum, and it's not a boring museum with paintings. The organizers have preserved the gloomy atmosphere, dim light, strange smells, and exhibits telling of the Marquis's madness. Tourists often complain of sudden panic attacks, dizziness, and the feeling that someone invisible is breathing down their necks. The House of Lamentations is a chilling reminder that grief can be more dangerous than any weapon. Tadeo Mejia loved his wife so much that he turned into a monster more terrifying than the bandits who killed her. Welcome to the canals of Xochimilco, near Mexico City. Here, amidst the quiet waters and dense greenery, hides an island that looks like a set for a Chucky movie, only multiplied by 1,000. This is La Isla de las Muñecas, the island of dolls. Imagine you're floating in a boat, silence all around, fog, and suddenly from behind the trees, hundreds of eyes begin to stare at you, empty, glassy, sometimes burned out eyes. The entire island is hung with old, broken, dirty dolls. They hang from branches, nailed to tree trunks, sitting on fence posts. Many have missing arms or legs, others have no heads, and some have real spiders nesting in their eye sockets instead of eyes. This is not an art project or a junkyard. This is the life's work of a hermit named Don Julian Santana Barrera. In the 1950s, he abandoned his family and went to live on this godforsaken island. Why? Legend has it that one day he found the body of a drowned girl in the canal. He couldn't save her, and a few days later a doll surfaced in the same spot. Don Julian decided it was a sign. He fished out the toy and hung it on a tree to appease the spirit of the deceased child. But the ghost, according to him, didn't leave. The girl allegedly cried at night and demanded new toys, and Don Julian began to lose his mind. For the next 50 years, he turned into an obsessive scavenger. He rummaged through garbage dumps, fished rotting plastic out of canals, and exchanged vegetables for old dolls with locals. He didn't clean or repair them. He hung them as they were, dirty, eyeless, covered in slime. He believed that the dolls were alive, that at night they would wake up, move their plastic limbs, and protect him from the evil spirit of the drowned girl. Locals who floated by swore they saw the dolls turn their heads to follow the boats. The atmosphere there is simply morbid. The sun has bleached the plastic and the rain has covered it in mold. The dolls look like mummified corpses of children. Don Julian lived among this horror for half a century, talking to them as if they were friends. But the end of this story makes even the most hardened skeptics believe in mysticism. In 2001, Don Julian's nephew came to visit his uncle and found him dead. Do you know where his body was? Floating in the canal? Exactly in the same spot where he found that little girl 50 years earlier. He drowned. Coincidence? Or did the girl's spirit finally take her only friend? Now the island has become a popular tourist destination, but guides warn, don't touch anything, and don't take anything with you, because the dolls, according to legend, really don't like to be separated. Welcome to San Jose, California. Here stands a house that is arguably the most expensive monument to paranoia in human history. This is the famous Winchester Mystery House. The owner of this mansion, Sarah Winchester, was the widow of the very rifle king, Oliver Winchester. After the death of her husband and child, she inherited a colossal fortune, about $20 million in modern money, that's $500 million, and 50% of the company's shares. But this money burned her hands. Sarah believed that a terrible curse lay upon her family, that the souls of all the people killed by Winchester rifles, soldiers, Native Americans, bandits, craved revenge and would soon come for her. She went to a medium who, perhaps just wanting to earn money, gave her a brilliant and insane piece of advice. Ghosts will find you if you stop. You must build a house. As long as the hammers are striking, you will live. As soon as the construction stops, you will die. Sarah took this literally. She bought an unfinished farm and began construction that didn't stop for a second for 38 years. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without holidays or weekends. Teams of carpenters rotated working to the sound of pounding hammers. Sarah had no architect. Every morning she put on a veil, went to her seance room, sketched insane plans on napkins that spirits allegedly dictated to her, and gave them to the foreman. The result? Architectural schizophrenia. In this house, staircases lead to dead-end ceilings, doors open into brick walls, windows are embedded in the floor. There are closets that are actually secret passages, and chimneys that don't lead to the roof. Why? Sarah believed that ghosts were foolish creatures. She built labyrinths to confuse evil spirits, to disorient them, to make them get lost in endless corridors. While she herself slept in one of 13 bedrooms, she changed them every night. The number 13 maniacally repeats throughout the house. Many windows have 13 panes, staircases have 13 steps, chandeliers have 13 candles. Even Sarah's will was signed 13 times. The most chilling place is a door on the second floor that opens directly onto the street. No balcony, no railings, just a step into emptiness from a height of several meters. A perfect trap for an uninvited guest, living or dead. Construction stopped instantly on the day of Sarah's death in 1922. Carpenters simply dropped their nails half driven into the wall and left. The silence that fell over the house for the first time in 38 years, they say, was deafening. Today, it's a giant tourist labyrinth, but guides admit that they sometimes still get lost in these corridors, and night watchmen hear footsteps and sighs. Perhaps Sarah was right, and the ghosts did find their way into this house after all. We've reached the finale, and if the previous houses were strange, funny, or frightening, this place is pure, concentrated evil. Forget about ghosts. Here, the monster was a man of flesh and blood. Let's travel to Chicago, 1893. The city is preparing for the World's Fair. There's a festive atmosphere in the streets. Crowds of tourists are looking for lodging. And then he appears, Dr. H. Holmes. A charming, handsome man with blue eyes who is building a huge hotel for visitors to the city. From the outside, the building looked impressive but normal. On the first floor were a pharmacy and shops, but the second and third floors, that was an architectural plan for hell. Holmes changed contractors every week so that no one but him knew the true layout of the building. And when construction was finished, the hotel became a perfect killing machine. Imagine you check into a room. A pleasant host smiles at you, gives you the keys. You go to sleep smelling a faint whiff of gas and never wake up again. Holmes designed the house to have complete control over his victims. Many rooms had hidden gas pipes running into them, with a valve located in Holmes's own bedroom. He didn't even need to enter the victim's room. He simply turned the valve and waited for everything to go silent. The walls of the rooms were soundproof and lined with steel sheets so that no one would hear screams. Doors were blocked from the outside. In the corridors were false walls, secret peepholes for spying, and staircases that, like in the Winchester house, led nowhere. But if Sarah Winchester confused ghosts, Holmes captured living people. But the most terrifying thing was not in the rooms, but in the basement. The bodies of the victims didn't need to be dragged upstairs. Holmes designed special chutes and grease-lubricated slides disguised as linen chutes. The body from the room fell directly into the basement, and there was a real disposal facility. In the basement were vats of acid, a pit of quicklime, and a huge crematorium furnace. There was also a dissecting table with a set of surgical instruments. Holmes didn't just kill, he profited from it. He often cleaned the skeletons of victims of flesh and sold them to medical schools as teaching aids. No one asked questions about where the doctor got so much material. No one knows exactly how many people died in this house. Holmes confessed to 27 murders, but historians believe the number could be as high as 200. People simply entered the hotel and disappeared, dissolving into the labyrinths of this castle. When the police finally uncovered the secret of this place, America was shocked. It was the first case in history where a house was built not for living, but as a murder weapon. The castle burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances shortly after Holmes's arrest. But the legend of the devil in the White City lives on to this day. It's a reminder that the most terrifying beast on the planet is not a ghost or a demon, but a human being with an architectural degree and a black hole instead of a soul. So there you have them. 13 houses born of madness. Some built them from trash, trying to escape the end of the world. Some sought to immortalize love, while others turned their home into a deadly trap. The line between genius and madness is sometimes thinner than the walls in these mansions. And honestly, after these stories, my mortgage 2-bedroom apartment seems like the coziest and safest place on earth. Write which of these houses you would like to spend a night in. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to not miss the next investigation. Yeah,